For about the last 7 weeks or so, we've been working through the book of James, a letter in the New Testament that the brother of Jesus wrote to the early believers. And about the same time as I was planning that, I heard from Vanessa that her book was being published and coming out. So I grabbed a copy and read it and thought, I would like to invite her to come, because her book is not just a travelogue, it's a dialogue with God through the book of James. And so, Vanessa, thanks for joining us today. Do you want to make her welcome?
Thank you, Chris. I like that description, a dialogue with God through the book of James. I think that fits really well. Thank you. And so I actually discovered that Chris, we are both fans of Adrian Plass, the writer. You might know him, especially if you're a bit sort of my age or a bit older. He wrote a very funny book called The Sacred Diary of Adrian Plass. I looked up when it was published, 1987, and I think a lot of it's based on him, as you can tell from the title. But it is fiction, but his character is he has a good laugh at himself. He's like an earnest Christian, wanting to do the right thing, but always making mistakes, getting confused. And I could relate to a lot of that. And so I took inspiration from Adrian Plass, I think, in thinking I could write about faith in a way that's hopefully funny and engaging, and really focuses on those funny moments when we're trying, but we want to do our best, but we maybe misunderstand what God's telling us, and then we try again. So it was fun to find that. So I became, on Facebook, I joined the Adrian Plass Appreciation Society, I think it's called, something like that. And I was amazed. So Adrian Plass is in England. He lives in the north of England somewhere. And I think he's about 70 now, or maybe 72. Still very active, still writes books, does a podcast that I believe Chris is involved with. So I was very excited to find that the moderator or admin or whatever of this Facebook page was this Baptist pastor in Torquay. Chris was in Torquay at the time. So we connected, and Chris has encouraged me with a book and given me as advice. And it's wonderful to be here and I just really enjoyed being part of that wonderful worship and being able to share communion with you. And thank you for having me. So I've got my husband here today. I've done this talk a few times in women's events or one midweek event, and he wasn't there, so he's here today. So it's the first time he's hearing it. And a lot of it's about him, so yeah, hopefully I get it right. Yeah. So look, the story, the reason about in 2012, so 12 years ago now, we did a trip around Australia. It was 14 weeks in a camper trailer. Thank you, Toby. Perfect. Yeah, so a camper trailer that you hitch onto the back of the car. And yeah, it was Lee's idea. In the book, I called him Hamish. We're trying to have a little bit of anonymity, but his name is Lee. It was his idea. He got it all ready, got the car ready with extra big tyres and a snorkel so we could drive through, rivers if we had to, and the camper trailer. So we bought the camper trailer together, but he sort of investigated it, and it was this big camper trailer that, so our bed was on top, and then on one side, there was a bedroom on either side. We have 3 children, and our son, who was 5 at the time, slept on one side, and the 2 girls on the other. And so he got that all ready. That's the 3 kids on the camper trailer there, and it was a lot of, as you can imagine, it was a lot of organising, a lot of preparation. And before we left, someone from our church, we go to Kilsyth South Baptist Church in Melbourne, and an older man, John, he said, "Oh, I've heard about your trip. Tell us how you go, send us some emails." And about 2 weeks into the trip, I thought, gosh, there's a lot to tell. I better start those emails because so many mishaps, so many funny things had happened. So one of the things was the camper trailer. I've got a picture somewhere. I forget what order I put now, but the camper trailer was really big. So we didn't fit into a standard camping site. So so often we'd have to be moved around, or we'd choose, there we go. As you can see, it's really huge. That's with the awning as well that had, it was a wonderful camper trailer, but it didn't fit a standard caravan park site. So we often had to choose to stay in free camping, and free camping, sometimes there was a drop toilet, but sometimes you had to dig your own hole for a toilet. So it was fairly adventurous, and I started these emails because I thought, the funny stories are just building up. And one of them was that we got to a place in Geraldton in Western Australia, or near Geraldton, Coronation Beach, and there weren't any campsites left. There was sort of an area, a bit of a vacant area, but it was on a hill. And these two older men, we bumped into a lot of people, maybe 65 plus, who were retired and travelling and had lots of advice and often really helpful. But this particular time, the advice wasn't great, and they were like, you could just camp on the slope here. And Lee was actually, I don't think so. Anyway, I said, look, what else are we going to do? I persuaded him to let them help us push the camper trailer sort of up onto this slope. Then lo and behold, it rolled down the hill, heading toward Lee. He managed to kind of straddle the drawbar, so that the pointy bit that attaches to the car, he managed to kind of open his legs up, and the pointy bit went in between his legs and crashed into a fence. And after that, I didn't listen to them. I said, okay, honey, where do you think we should be? Oh, yeah. So he went for a walk down the beach, thanking God that he was okay. And it was not long after that, I thought, I've got to start these emails. I was also reading the book of James, and I'd started reading the book of James before we went because I had had a bit of a rough time. I struggled as a mum of young children. I'd experienced depression on and off in my life, and that was quite a hard time, a particularly hard time. And so I'd started to read the book of James. So when I wrote these emails to about 20 people, some from the church and some relatives and friends, some who were not Christians, I thought I'll tell them, I'll include what I'm finding really valuable from the book of James. They might think it's a bit odd, the ones that aren't Christians, but that it won't hurt for them to hear how important it is to me. So I started sharing not only about these things that were happening, but also what I was reading and what I was learning from the book of James. And I mentioned that I found it hard as a young mum. So I was an only child. My husband had 3 siblings, and they were a very sort of teamwork family. They actually moved around a lot because his father was in the Air Force, and they were kind of like, they actually had camping holidays, that were like, everybody grab a corner of the tent and work together. And even though they moved around a lot, they managed to stay a close family. They had good family connections. And I'm an only child, and also my parents were separated when I was very young. I fortunately did still have a relationship with my dad, which was great. And then I had a stepfather for about 16 years, but then about that. Then him and my mum separated. My mum later remarried. So my mum had been married 3 times, so I had a very different kind of experience of family. And I became a Christian when I was 23. I had been interested for a few years, and when I met Lee, I I said to him, I want to become religious. And he said, well, we'll start by going to church. So we started, but that's actually a whole nother story. I don't usually get into that. But I did become a Christian about the age of 23, which is wonderful. And the biggest thing in my life, I was just thinking about that song, Your Goodness is Running After Me. The biggest thing was enabling me to get married and have the faith that not only would someone be loyal, but I would be loyal and faithful, and that even if it was hard, so God gave me a real conviction after a bit of a wrestle. Lee says he proposed 4 times, but that's one of those things we disagree on. So that's just, I'm so grateful for my marriage and my family, and I thank God for that. And all right. So when I said, so I'll just go back to the time when we went away. So we've got the 3 children. Our third child, we've got 2 girls, and both very strong-willed, but wonderful, good at communicating, very similar to us, I suppose. And then we had a third child, and he was a bit different, and there wasn't the same bond. He wasn't interested, up until about the age of 2, he was only interested in things, in balls or things that were round. Then it moved to dinosaurs, and he wouldn't be interested in the storybooks about dinosaurs. It had to be, this is what this one ate, and this is what this one was called, and this all the very sort of scientific, technical information. And I thought he was quite rude. He didn't seem to have good manners or be able to think about anyone else. And I was thinking, I've really mucked up here. I was all right with the first 2, but actually I got no idea what I'm doing. I just got lucky now. This truth's out. I've got no idea what I'm doing as a mum. And I felt like a real failure. And some of you might be thinking already that from the details I've given, he was eventually diagnosed with autism, and he's actually doing really well now, and we're so pleased. But at the time, and I thought because I'm a bit soft, I wasn't good at discipline. Lee has that ability to be fun but also firm, and so I thought this is my fault. I'm not a good mum. I've got no idea what I'm doing. So when Lee suggested this holiday, or not really a holiday, but an adventure, I thought, wow, great. He can share the load with me. I mean, he was wonderful when he was home, but 24/7 we can actually share the load. I'll have help. I won't have to manage our son especially, but all 3 of them on our own. So I had been through that period of really struggling with depression, also being a mum at home, or anybody who's been a parent at home with young children probably knows it can be very isolating. You don't have the self-esteem you get from getting a paycheck or having a boss thank you, or so it can be very isolating, and I really struggled as a mum, especially with the 3. So I was really excited about, I'll spend 3 months with Lee, he'll be able to help me. So when it turned out that it wasn't that easy, like as I've already said, the camper trailer didn't fit. We had another challenge as we had when we got to Western Australia. It took us about 10 days to get to Perth, and we went up the west coast. We discovered that there aren't that many places to camp for free in Western Australia. They're quite particular, and they don't like. And one time we were heading toward a place that in my map book said it had free camping. Then I said, hang on, we've got to have a chemical toilet. What's a chemical toilet? So we had to go to a camping shop, find a toilet that, the chemicals help break down the waste, and then you tip it at one of those caravan park places or with, special sewage disposal. So that was another challenge. We got bogged in Western Australia on Ningaloo Beach, which, funny enough, was more stressful for Lee than I, because he, was worried about the car and looking after us. And I was like, it's all right, we'll just go and ask those boys down the road, they'll help us. So there was a lot of challenges. So I kept coming back to the book of James, and I'll see where I'm up to here. And in particular, the verse that helped me, and I know you've been working on James, so you would have had this one right at the beginning of James. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. And it always helped me feel really calm, knowing that God would somehow turn hard things into a blessing, even though I wasn't really quite sure how that was going to work out. So where am I up to? So we did, of course, have wonderful times. I thought I'd better include a photo where we saw something really spectacular. So there's a photo of a waterfall at Bell's Gorge, which is in the Kimberley in the Northern Territory, and that's just one example of stunning, beautiful scenery you can see in Australia. Our highlights were probably the Kimberley and Karajini National Park in Western Australia. If you ever get the chance to go, it's just wonderful. And so we did see many beautiful places, and of course the kids loved swimming in the waterfall. So this is after, in the wet season, there's a lot of rain, and then after the wet season, we were there about July, at Bell's Gorge, this beautiful waterfall full of water, and we had a swim at the bottom as well. So that's just to tell you we did see some beautiful things and have some wonderful, fun times. But as I've said, there was also a lot of challenges, and not just the camping, the practical camping challenges, but we're also very different personalities. So Lee likes to plan things and stick to a plan, and I might say I'll do something, but then, when it actually comes to it, I might not feel like it, I might change my mind. So I'll try to change his mind, which makes him frustrated. So we're very different people, and much different approach to parenting. As I already said, I wanted his help, but found it difficult sometimes that he was so strict, whereas I was much more sort of free about everything. And I also felt a bit inferior, like Lee was so good at packing and unpacking the car, and he could drive for really long distances. I remember one time I was determined, I'm going to drive for 2 hours. 2 hours is not that much, you've been driving 6-8 hours sometimes. But towards the end, I just got really tired, ended up hitting a poor wallaby, didn't survive, and let Lee take over again. So I was feeling a bit like, he's not only was it challenging, but that he was really good at things that I wasn't. Got left behind on hikes. I've got a picture of a big boulder somewhere. There's the one. So this was just to give you an idea, like Lee and our 2 younger children actually got over that. This was a walk in the Kimberley, and he managed to clamber over that boulder. We were a bit younger then, and then pull the kids over. So that's just to give you an idea. Sometimes this walking was not really walking. That was a particularly big boulder. My older daughter and I didn't even attempt that one. We're just looking at it. But the hiking was often like really strenuous over boulders, not much smaller than that. So I kept reading through the book of James when I was, I'd wake up in the morning and think, oh my goodness, another day where we're going to be able to find somewhere to camp today. How are we going to go? I kept turning back to the book of James, and I'd like to just mention 2 particular things that I learnt. And one relates to that verse, consider it joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. And in discussions with Lee and research and listening to podcasts and reflecting on our experience, I came up with the first thing I learned was, well, when we experience trials, we're forced to change. So when everything's going fine and we're successful and we're meeting all our goals, we just keep going. But when things are not working out, we're forced to address things and to change. And, you know, one of the things that happened was I got more patient with my son. So it was amazing to learn that if I actually explained things to him calmly and patiently, it was amazing how cooperative he could be, whereas I was expecting him to be like my other two children, and it wasn't working. We also learn in our marriage, I think, how to get along better. And people older than us, you know, will have learnt lots of things about life and have lots of wisdom to share because of all the trials they've been through and all the things that they've had to overcome. And so in our marriage, you know, some simple things. I got a bit better at helping with the camper trailer. I thought, well, maybe I'll just ask Lee what goes first, how do you do it, instead of feeling like I should know what to do. We're more likely to have a laugh now at the ways that we are different, and we just have more of a sense of humour about it. One little example is we're just better at, he does the things he's good at or enjoys doing, and I do the things I'm good at or enjoy doing. And one little example was grocery shopping. So normally either he or I would do the grocery shopping. On the trip we attempted to do it together, you know, because you're together all the time in a situation like that. And he had a totally different approach. So his idea of grocery shopping is that you go down every single aisle, whether you only need a few things or you're doing a big shop, and you compare. So if you want rice, you compare. Well, which one's on special? What about the weight of it? Is it really a good deal? So his grocery shopping takes a very, very long time. So I got very impatient with that. So now he does the grocery shopping, almost always. So that's just a little way that we've changed, and it seems to be working. So now the other thing, and I imagine you've talked about this going through James, but when we experience trials, we're more likely to turn to God. And I turned to God when I was struggling as a young mum. That was how I picked up, kept going. Every time I read through the New Testament, the book of James would just speak to me, and I just kept going back to it. And in particular, that verse, consider it pure joy. So if I hadn't had that hard time, I may not have gone to the Bible. And I continued to go to the Bible through the trip. And, you know, we'd have an argument, and I'd find something in the book of James to help me forgive and soften, and it would just became every day of the trip I could see how James was helping me, that the very trials were helping me draw closer to him. And I realised they were minor trials, but at the time they felt big, and they were drawing me closer to God. So I got one more sort of message that I learnt that I thought I'd share with you. And a lot of what's in James is really practical, like about not getting angry, and you know, there's a lot of practical advice. But there's also, I think, some real useful scriptures about our relationship with God. And one of the things I was doing was I was trying to be a good person in my own strength, or trying to, you know, one of the things I mention in the book is when we were sort of on this trip, and shortly after we got back, Sebastian was going to start school, that's our son, and I was going to start looking for a job again. And so I was nervous about that. Well, I've had 6 years at home with children. What if I don't know what I'm doing anymore? And I had a bit of pressure from my mum growing up because she had not had the chance to go to university, even though she'd done quite well in school. She'd left in year 10 to help with a difficult family situation. And so she hoped that and I was an only child, she hoped that I would, be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. And so I always felt that I'd let her down. And so there was that. There was feeling like I wasn't as capable as Lee, and so there were times when there'd be conflict because I would feel I need to prove myself. And I thought I might read a little bit out of the book because let me see where I'm up to now. Yeah, we had I just wanted to say that I've learned a lot from Lee through having his different perspective and his different family experience, and he's taught me that I don't love you because of the things you do or you bring to the marriage, or because you do 50% of the heavy lifting or whatever. I just love you. I just want to spend time with you. I'm like, really? Oh, yeah, that's hard to believe. And yet this is the message that I've had for him and I've been blessed to have. And there was a point on the trip when this really came home to me. And so it says in James that there's another verse, Toby, the verse... hang on, I better pick these up. Yeah, there's a verse about Abraham leaving Isaac on the altar. And I'm just going to go to going to read something from the book, if that's okay. So I'll start with the scripture. So I'm reading the Bible. So this is the last story. I'm sorry if I'm going over time. The background to it was we'd had a couple of weeks before, maybe a week before, I'd got left behind on a hike. So this was that kind of hiking with big rocks, and I'd got left behind, and I was very angry and upset. And then I did forgive Lee, but I was still feeling a bit upset about it. And then we arrived in Mataranka, beautiful place in the Northern Territory, and I said, wow, look, there's a really nice restaurant and there's a band, and why don't we give up our plan to cook dinner and go down and have dinner down there? And Lee didn't want to. He's like, no, we're planned, don't forget, we're going to be in Alice Springs next week. We're going to go to that restaurant. Remember, we planned. I'm like, yeah, but, as I said before, I'm much more spontaneous. I did actually talk him into going to the restaurant. But in my opinion, he wasn't enthusiastic enough. He should have agreed immediately. So I was upset and hurt. He doesn't want me to have any fun. He left me behind on the hike. He's not enthusiastic about my ideas. So I was really quite upset. Then the next day I was reading, so in this beautiful place, Mataranka, and I read from the Bible, and I thought I'd just share this with you. So I'm starting with a verse from James. So, was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. I clicked on the link below. The Understand Your Bible notes were written in a cute font that looked like handwriting. James is not suggesting we must add works to our faith to ensure God's love for us. His point is that a real faith that believes God will be accompanied by acts of obedience. Abraham believed God, therefore he obeyed him, putting Isaac on the altar. A real faith, a faith that believes God, will be accompanied by a changed life. To quote Martin Luther, faith alone saves, but faith that saves is not alone. Something loosened inside me. I'd been looking at things the wrong way. I wanted to work hard and excel at something to please God, like I should have pleased Mum and made her happy. In fact, God wanted my obedience, like Abraham leaving Isaac on the altar. I wasn't quite sure what obedience would look like, but it wasn't about trying to be useful or successful. I told Hamish on the way to Tennant Creek, while the kids watched movies and Hamish and I shared a bag of licorice I'd found in the park shop. After I'd calmed down on the walk, we were speaking again. I've been learning how our deeds are an expression of our faith, but they're not what makes God love us. I've heard it lots of times in church, but it hadn't sunk in. I'm still trying to be useful to God. Hamish swallowed a piece of licorice. I remember when I really got close to God as a teenager when I was in youth group. I was happy. I volunteered in hospitals visiting the patients. I didn't do it because I had to. I was full of joy. I wanted to do it. I felt close to God when I was helping. I'd heard all about Hamish's youth group days. He went to meet girls, but he ended up meeting God and volunteering. Hamish turned toward me. I feel the same way about you. I don't love you because you do things for me. I just love spending time with you. I felt a bit uncomfortable. I would rather rely on my usefulness, uncertain as that was, than Hamish's goodness in loving me just for me. I ignored Hamish's gaze. He didn't want to spend time with me at the restaurant. I looked out the passenger window as far away from Hamish as possible. I didn't want to get hurt again. My family were always relaxed when we ate out. I wanted to relive a happy memory. I didn't know that. I glanced back at Hamish. He seemed thoughtful. How about we go out in Alice Springs? I've been doing some research. There's a restaurant that serves Australian bush food, crocodile and stuff. It wasn't very spontaneous. We wouldn't be in Alice Springs until later in the week. What was the atmosphere like? Would the wind be blowing the right way that night? I'd rather respond to the feeling of the moment. It was sweet, though, the idea of Hamish enjoying my company, planning a special meal for us all. I stared out at the flat, barren landscape. I found the biggest piece of licorice in the bag and handed it to him. I hope that gives you a picture of how I tied in from my own experience with what I thought that message was in James, that we serve God out of our love for him and wanting to spend time with him, not to be useful to him because he's God. And I hope that made sense about what I learned from the book of James. And thank you very much for having me today.
Thanks, Vanessa. That's wonderful. So after the end of the service, if you want to grab a sausage or something, you can go and talk to Vanessa and find out some more. And there are some books available that you can buy and take with you. And it's probably not too early to consider Christmas presents. I don't know. So if you want to do that. So we're going to close with a song, and then I'd just ask at the end of the song if you just take your seats again for a couple of minutes. Thanks.
Let us stand. Ooh, I'm back. Let us sing about this is the day that the Lord has made.
This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice as we lift His name. This is the day that the Lord has made. Come and rejoice. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Whether the sun will shine, whether the skies will rain, I know that you are good, and this is the day you made. Whether in life or death, whether in joy or pain, I know this truth remains, that this is the day you made. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice as we lift His name. This is the day that the Lord has made. Come and rejoice. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Now I can walk in faith. You will protect my way. Your every work is good, and this is the day you made. I am a child of yours. You are the one who saves. I am redeemed by love, and this is the day you made. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice as we lift His name. This is the day that the Lord has made. Come and rejoice. We will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day, come and sing your praise, for the Lord now reigns on the throne of grace. Soon is the day He will bring us home, and we have this hope, for we are His own. This is the day, come and sing your praise, for the Lord now reigns on the throne of grace. Soon is the day He will bring us home, and we have this hope, for we are His own. This is the day, come and sing your praise, for the Lord now reigns on the throne of grace. Soon is the day He will bring us home, and we have this hope, for we are His own.
So a few days ago, I let the elders know that I wouldn't be seeking a subsequent term as team leader with the church here beyond the current term end date, which is 6th of January next year, so it's still a while off. The decision comes partly because I recognise that with the increases that all churches have faced in the costs of insurance and other outgoings, all being greater than the growth of income, our church is going to face ongoing challenges in maintaining 2 full-time staff positions beyond the end of 2024. After prayer and consideration, I've decided that taking on the responsibilities of the team leader role in a part-time capacity would not be for me. And I want to ensure that the church has ample scope and capacity to engage in meaningful discussions with Josh, as his contract also approaches its end date in May next year. There are also some other personal, ministry and family factors that have influenced Robin and I making this decision. Having shared this with you now means that there's 5 months still. The next 5 months is available for the elders and the church together to make choices for the future in a more extended time frame, and the elders will keep you informed about that at the appropriate time. Robin and I are not leaving Warragul. We'll still be at our home here and so maintain the friendships that we've built during our time living here so far. However, we do not plan to continue attending Warragul Church of Christ beyond the end of the year so that we don't risk being old wineskins interfering with the new wine. During the remaining months of my present pastoral term here, I'll continue to preach and lead services, to visit and pray with people, as well as preparing things to best help the transition to come.
We know that God has done much in you and through you during these past few years. We have seen you growing in the knowledge of God and in your friendships with one another. We are grateful to have been co-workers with each of you in what God is doing here, and we will continue to share in that for the remainder of our time here as part of Warragul Church of Christ.
As Chris mentioned, he shared the announcement with the elders last week. There's a story in the Bible about Esther, who God used greatly because she was in the right place at the right time. A well-known verse in Esther 4:14 goes, "For such a time as this." And Chris has certainly been that for us. Arriving just before COVID and the lockdowns, his IT skills were a God-given gift to enable us to run church online and conduct Zoom meetings. We will miss the many unique skills that Chris has brought to his ministry here. We've also benefited greatly from his breadth and depth of knowledge of the Bible and God. His teaching emphasising the goodness of God and the freedom of the Christian faith has been inspiring. There's so much that Chris has shared in his ministry time with us. His vision to see the benefits of renovating the chapel and managing the project to turn the stage around to this refreshing and functional format has been another gift to us all. Many people have benefited from Robin and Chris's visits and care. As we all adjust to the implications of the conclusion of Chris's ministry at the end of this year, we will all need to step up and work together to fill the gaps. This church fellowship needs us all to consider how we can be more actively involved in helping the many facets of ministry, including eldership, rosters, practical tasks, and so on. We will need to support one another as we work together to minister to each other, this community, and beyond. Thank you, Robin and Chris, for your ministry with us. We wish you every blessing as you look to what God has next in store for you both. Let's pray. Father, thank you for Chris and for Robin and the gift that they have been to us over these past 5 years. We pray for them and for us as we go through a period of transition. May we all know you are walking beside us each day as we journey into the future with you. Amen.